Good afternoon, my name is Gracen Daniel, and today we are here for our next installment of the Living Legends series. Thank you to Griffith Barbee for sponsoring our interview today, and it is my esteemed pleasure to be here today with our living legend, Miss Veronica Moyé. Before we begin, I'd like to give a brief background for Miss Moyé. Miss Veronica Moyé is a partner at Gibson Dunn in Dallas and the co-chair of the firm's Global Litigation Practice Group. Ms. Moyé received her law degree from Harvard Law School, and she holds a degree in chemical engineering from MIT. At Gibson Dunn, she serves as lead counsel on highly complex matters in a wide variety of disciplines, including antitrust, intellectual property, class actions, and commercial disputes. She currently serves on the firm's executive committee. She's nationally recognized for her abilities and accomplishments as trial lawyer, and that's where she and I met in writing her article in Headnotes as Trial Lawyer of the Year that she just received, nominated by Chrissy Castle and through the Dallas Bar Association. Most recently in 2022, Ms. Moyé was named Trial Lawyer of the Year and to Benchmark's Top 10 Women in Litigation. Benchmark Litigation also named Ms. Moyé to its 2021 Top 100 Trial Lawyers in America list. She's been recognized for her antitrust work by Chambers from 2010 to now. She's also named as one of the best lawyers in America for commercial litigation and antitrust. Texas Lawyer named Ms. Moyé one of its extraordinary minorities in Texas law in 2015, and the Dallas Business Journal named her one of the leading women in business in North Texas. I want to start out with asking a few questions about your background. And so where did you grow up and how did you wind up at Harvard Law School?
Well, thank you, Gracen. Let me start by saying it is just a delight to be here with you. I'm deeply honored to be doing this interview and to be chosen as the DBA Trial Lawyer of the Year. My Dallas roots are very deep. I was born in Dallas, Texas, at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas. I don't think you can be more Dallas than that. Spent all of my years here through high school. So I went to Catholic schools in Oak Cliff where my family lived. My parents, before I started school, so when we were very little, decided to convert to Catholicism. And they made that decision, they say, in large part, specifically because they wanted their children to go to integrated schools, but to go to peacefully integrated schools where everyone had chosen to be in that environment. So I had 3 brothers and 1 sister. I was the middle child. And we all went to Catholic schools our whole life. And we all went to Catholic schools that were specifically designed to be 1/3 Black, 1/3 Hispanic, and 1/3 white. And so it was an environment where everybody wanted to be in that environment, where all the families were close. I mean, you probably know Catholic families tend to be large. So everyone had a sibling from each family unit in their class growing up, and the families were all very, very close. But it is always amazing to me, you know, coming from Dallas and coming from the South, how they created this kind of clearly artificial, but very supportive environment for us, so that I really didn't experience, you know, hostility, you know, based on race or factors like that until I got to Boston. So it is just an amazing and different experience, I think, from what people would expect from somebody in my position. But it's just because my parents made those great choices and those tremendous sacrifices, because neither of my parents went to college. And so the sacrifice financially of sending 5 children through Catholic school was tremendous for them. They were just completely devoted to us and our future. And for them, education was the key. And they were absolutely right. I always wanted to go to law school. No one wanted me to go to law school, so I was actively discouraged from doing so, which is how I end up with a degree in chemical engineering. That was my safety blanket in case the law school thing didn't work out. But of course, the passion to be a lawyer never went away, and I was fortunate enough to get accepted at Harvard Law School. So I went straight through. Right after undergrad, I went down the street to Harvard and did the 3 years there.
And we'll talk about this case in just a moment, but regarding your prolific Apple trial dubbed the Super Bowl of Antitrust, You were quoted by the Texas Law Book in saying that the team I was working with for closing was all women. It's the beginning of a bright new future other women will have. It's going to be so much better than the world that I came up in. Following up with that statement, can you tell me more about the world that you came up in?
Sure. I graduated from law school, I'm almost ashamed to say, in 1986. I bet it was before you were born. Please don't tell me if that's true. And it was a fundamentally different world. I started at a law firm in New York, Cravath, Swaine and Moore. And at Cravath, they had a partner bathroom, one, which means there were only men as partners, and there was no expectation that there would be a need for another bathroom. So it was a very, very different world where you felt you were constantly the different person, you know. Before the Apple v. 𝐓𝐿𝐵𝐿C trial that you just mentioned, I had never gone to trial with another woman. That was the first time I had been in the courtroom with women having speaking roles on both sides of the table. And that's why it was just such, you know, a momentous experience, because we fought so long and so hard to get those frontline roles. And it was not at all expected or common when I first came out of law school. It was very much an uphill battle. And so it's wonderful. Whenever I'm in a room with all women lawyers, it is incredible. The 𝐓𝐿𝐵𝐿C v. Apple case, there were many times when we were preparing Tim Cook for his testimony where every lawyer in the room was a woman. The general counsel of Apple was a woman. The head of litigation was a woman. My two associates who were working with me were women. And Tim at one point looked up and said, "I've never been in a meeting with all women before." And we said, "Get used to it." He laughed.
I want to talk about your time in New York. I've learned that a few of your core values are preparation and being the most authentic to your style and yourself. Can you tell us about your time working as a young associate at Cravath on the Time Warner merger and what you did to embody those values?
Sure. When I came out of law school, you know, I knew very much that it was going to be an uphill battle. So I was just committed to being as diligent and as hardworking as possible. I was the person, I was actually just talking to someone about this yesterday. I wanted to be the first person in the office. I was that much of the geek girl, like turning on the copy machines, right? So I would come in like very early in the morning before anyone else got there. Now in New York, that's 8, you know, because New York starts at 9:30. But just to be able to have personal time with the partners that I was most impressed with, you know, and have the opportunity to learn from them about their lives and just to develop relationships with them. I think that was a really valuable investment because it made me feel like I knew them as people, and so it was okay for them to know me as a person and to take some risks. So the Time Warner case you mentioned in particular, I was working on that case. Time was going to merge with Warner, and then we had a hostile bid from Paramount. And so the litigation was between Time and Paramount. And my job had been to work with the board. We knew litigation was coming, and so I started going to board meetings, and I was doing the minutes to make sure all of the right issues were discussed and that this was going to be defensible when we got into litigation. So once we did get into litigation, we had to submit declarations, affidavits from the directors about why they thought a merger with Warner was preferable to this proposal that Paramount had. So we had to go out and personally interview, you know, each one of these directors. Incredible slate of people. Martina Horner, the dean of Harvard Law School, just an incredible group of people, and each one of them had these fundamentally different voice and reasons for why they supported the Warner transaction. And so typically at that point in time, you would have these kind of rote affidavits where directors would say, "I think this was in the best long-term interest of the company because blah, blah, blah." And they would really all essentially say the same thing. I decided, wouldn't it be great if the court could actually hear the authentic voice of these people? And so what that meant is I had to do twice the work. I had to do like the rote version, and then I did this alternative version where each director in their own words said why they supported the transaction. So Martina Horner explained, for example, that Time is not a lipstick company in her declaration. And that was a reference to certain case law, Revlon duties they were called. And she was explaining why this is not that kind of situation, that we really are a different company because of our journalistic standards, and long-term value is more important than short-term shareholder cash out. But it just encapsulated her view on it. Now remember, we had one director from Temple, Texas, and he said, well, Paramount brought a lot to the party, but Warner kept more what you wanted to keep in the house. You know, very Texan, and we put that in his declaration. Luckily, the partner that I presented them to decided to go with the narrative voice. And so and this was a great early experience to like give you a little bit of confidence, because I was so delighted when the Delaware Supreme Court opinion, which is still reported, in the Time Warner case says, Time is not a lipstick company. And there's a different legal standard that applies. So yeah, that was really a rewarding early experience on how, you know, you don't have to do things the same way that everyone has always done them.
How did you wind up in New York after going to Harvard instead of Dallas?
Yeah, so I guess an unfortunate Dallas story. My mother, of course, desperately wanted me to return to Dallas. I had worked very hard in undergrad and in law school and had a lot of options. I told my mother I would come to Dallas to interview. I did. I interviewed with what was then the largest law firm in Dallas. And throughout the course of those interviews, Gracen, I would go from room to room, as you know you do in these interviews, and I would get different receptions on what was wrong with me. I was told I was too smart to be a litigator, which is, you know, an unusual state of affairs. I didn't know that you had to be not smart. You needed more seat of the pants skills. Finally, at dinner that night, the two partners that I went out with said, look, we don't think either the Dallas courts or our Dallas clients are ready for a black woman litigator. Have you considered doing tax law? And it was so disappointing to be accepted by, you know, every law firm I interviewed with in New York, every law firm in California, and home does not want me. So it was very clear to me, I did not want to be a tax lawyer, and it was very clear to me that I needed to go somewhere where I could actually learn the craft so that I could have some kind of confidence before going into kind of an environment that was just going to reject me because of things I could not change and did not want to change. So it was a very disappointing experience.
Coming from a large law firm in New York, where you succeeded and excelled the expectations that you probably even set for yourself, eventually we lucked out and got you back in Dallas.
Great.
And so when did you move back to Dallas, and why did you do so?
So I moved back to Dallas in 1997 as a result of having my first wonderful child, who actually happens to be in the room right now. I don't know if I should say that. But I had my first daughter in 1995, September of 1995. I moved to Dallas in January of 97. And it was very much a family decision, not a career decision. I really wanted my daughter to grow up around her family. And as you know, this practice is extremely demanding. And so I really felt like I wanted my mother's support, wanted and needed my mother's support. So as crazy as it may sound from a professional point of view, I came home because I needed my mommy. I really did.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your mother and going to Harvard Law School and then eventually coming back to Dallas?
Sure. When I finally called my mom to say I'm coming back home, she was so delighted, especially because she then had a new granddaughter to play with, as she put it. She was just so delighted and so incredibly supportive of me in every way. My father died when I was 18 years old. At that point, there were 3 of us in college, and my 2 younger brothers were in high school. So my mother was an incredibly strong woman, incredibly strong, you know, and kind of more than my role model. I always say if I could be half a good mother as I had, then I knew my children would turn out fine. So when I came back, I mean, just instrumental to supporting me, as she had always been. This will sound strange, but I spoke to my mother every day. Like from the time I left home to the time I came back, we talked on the phone every day. But whenever I was feeling, you know, discouraged, overwhelmed, how can I get all this done? My mother had this little notepad and this pen, and she was like, oh, we can do this, we can do anything, we just have to organize. Okay, let's write down, what do we need to do? And she'd make a little list, and she'd help me organize, you know, how to get it done, and which part she was gonna do, and which part I was gonna do. She was just, you know, the light of our lives. You know, it really is wonderful to be back home with her. The interesting part about the transition is I came home because I needed my mother to help me. And once I got home, I found out I needed to help my mother. So she developed breast cancer shortly after I got home. And I was here to support her through that whole struggle. And she made it cancer-free for 5 years. But she later, much later, got sick, developed dementia, developed Alzheimer's. And I was here for her through all of that. So the return to Dallas really was like a thing that was meant to be, career aside. This was where I was supposed to be. And it's funny how you think you're coming for something for yourself, but it's really other reasons why I needed to be here.
Well, we're so glad to have you back, and you know, I'm around your daughter's age. We're getting there, and it's in the date range, and I know that she's incredibly proud of you.
Thank you.
So, as Trial Lawyer of the Year, you've had several big trial moments, and I can't wait to share those with our audience. So earlier you mentioned putting Tim Cook on direct during your Apple trial. So Tim Cook is the CEO of Apple. Can you tell us what that experience was like?
Really extremely, you know, rewarding experience. I mean, Apple is a tremendous client in the first place, and the products and the business model were something that we all deeply believed in. So the issues in the case were kind of core to the brand and core to the company. So tremendously important to the whole executive suite, but you know, very important to Tim. He wanted to testify in this trial. It probably wouldn't have been required, but he felt it was important that he stand up, you know, and really explain why the practices that were being challenged there were core to the brand identity and were core to protection of privacy, which is something he's very passionate about. So it was a tremendous honor to get to work with him, but I will tell you that the preparation for doing so, as you can imagine, is pretty intense. Tim is extremely hardworking and extremely bright, and so it's the perfect combination, you know, of witness. So there was no problem there, but everything was thought about. I mean, it's an important moment for him personally, but also an important moment for the company. And what I kept saying to my team as we're going through this preparation process is you have to realize that this man's words move markets, that what he says really matters well beyond this lawsuit, and the company will have to live with it, you know, for decades. And so you want to be both uber prepared, but not so scripted that it's not authentic, right? And you know that as a trial lawyer. So getting that balance was critical, and we had to spend enough time together to where I understood how he thinks and he understands where I'm going, so that we can have a natural dialogue that doesn't look so scripted. So it was a tremendous honor, probably like every other trial moment, and you've probably had this, Gracen, you're like a little bit nervous and a little bit worried until you stand up. And when you stand up, you start to do that thing you do, and the press and all the other stuff in the background is completely out of mind. You're like just completely in that moment with your witness getting what you need to get from them.
I describe it as being on a Ferris wheel and you don't realize how scary it is until you get to the top. And
Right.
then you say, oh,
Right,
pretty
exactly.
scary. And then you just keep
Exactly.
going. You come
Yeah,
back
I
down.
tell people that all the time. I mean, the nerves, the jitters, they never go away. I don't think there's a point at which you say, oh, I don't care anymore, you know. And I think that's good. I think
good.
you have to use that fear and that anxiety to work harder and prepare more, you know, to do a better job.
We talked earlier about a sad moment in you leaving Dallas. Do you ever think about that moment and that conversation that you had and in these big hallmark awards or accolades or accomplishments? Do you think back?
I do. I think about that a lot. And I think about, especially now in this moment, I mean, I wish my mother was still alive because she was so disappointed that I was not, you know, initially coming home. And she was so disappointed at the reasons why I couldn't initially come home. So to finally get to the point where actually I am accepted and respected, you know, in my own community is really a very good moment for me. It really is. It's very important. On all of these challenges, you know, as a Black woman doing this, you hear a lot of negativity from other people, but I think, Gracen, the thing that matters to me so much more is all of the support that I get from my community. During the Epic v. Apple trial, of course, the security people always assume that you're like a paralegal or one of the secretaries. So after I put Tim on, the marshals came up to me and said, oh my God, I can't believe you're a lawyer. You make us so proud. And that moment is repeated constantly for me. I mean, I got emails from other people. So the support that you get, that I get from the Black community way offsets any negativity that I get in other quarters. And it makes you realize that's another reason why you have a responsibility to do your absolute best, because my people are counting on me. And so I'm never going to not be my absolute best.
I want to talk about your trial team from Apple. And we talk about this case because it speaks as somewhat of a capstone of
Right.
all of your accomplishments and your core values that precede it.
Right.
So your trial team was uniquely diverse, and you told me that that was not planned.
Right.
Can you talk about how you formed your trial team and tell everyone about that?
Sure. I mean, as you can imagine, we had a limited number of people speaking in court, but we had a huge team of people working on this case across the firm, you know, across offices. So from DC, from Dallas, from California, and from New York as well, from all of our significant offices locally. And, you know, the way we form the trial team is by picking who is the best person for this role on this case, like period. You know, no collateral issues were discussed. I had been a part of the team that was going to defend these business practices before the Epic case was filed. Because again, we knew someone was going to sue, we didn't know who. And we formed the team just with that criteria. And it ended up being just an amazingly diverse team, and we didn't realize it until we were on a call one time and we looked up and we said, oh my God, you know, the in-court team was going to be one white man, one African-American woman, one Indian-American man, one Chinese-American man. I mean, it was incredible, just incredible. So it was, what I say was so good about it is this is the way it's supposed to be, you know, and it's the fruit of a lot of investment by the firm. I mean, obviously all those people are not new associates, right? So over the years, these people have been nurtured and brought into the firm and put in a position to be the best. And it just happens to be that it's incredibly diverse. So it was extremely satisfying for all of us at the firm when we finally realized it, like, wow, we've actually achieved something here.
For those that don't know, Veronica was included on the defenders list of the best defense lawyers in North Texas as a result of the unanimous defense verdict she obtained when representing writer, producer, director, and actor Tyler Perry during trial of a copyright infringement claim in the Eastern District of Texas. Can you tell us what it was like receiving that verdict and what happened that day?
Yes, that was a whole different type of experience, as you can imagine, you know, working with an entertainer. Tremendous fun in a lot of ways, but again, a kind of high pressure scenario because Tyler is, you know, felt his personal integrity had been attached. And then basically that's what it was, right? This woman was saying he had copied her work. And he felt very good about the trial. It's like, oh, I got this. As you know, any trial with any jury, how do you know I have this, right? So as we're waiting for the verdict to come in, he's sitting with his press people preparing his statement, his victory statement. And a couple of his people pull me aside into another room and say, you need to prepare the not victory statement because if there's no victory, you're going out there by yourself and Tyler's going out the back room. And I said, I understand completely, and of course we will appeal, you know, had my whole little statement ready. So when the verdict came in, he was just delighted, you know, so proud of himself that he had stood up. The studio, probably, I mean, the studios don't want to take any risks, but this was a very personal issue for Tyler. So we come out of the courtroom holding hands with this big victory, you know, and taking pictures, and my client from the studio came up to me and crying and said, I didn't want to tell you this, but I was told if we lost this case, I would have been fired. He said, I didn't want you to feel pressure.
No pressure.
Like, thank God you did not tell me that, and thank God you still have your job. And that client is still employed at the studio. So.
And you didn't have to read your script.
Right, and I didn't have to read my, not victory script.
So one of the things that people may recognize is your shared last name with District Judge Veronica Moyé. Judge Moyé also values preparation and candor from the bar. Right. As a trial lawyer married to a judge, can you tell us what, if anything, that you've learned from your direct interactions and what you think other lawyers would want to know?
Yeah, I think that, you know, Judge Moyé, like many judges, as you say, really demands, you know, intense preparation and total candor. And I think many lawyers do forget that. I think there's a feeling sometimes that you can spin facts or you can divert a question and not directly answer it. And I think, you know, Eric has just reinforced all of my instincts that, you know, preparation is just absolutely key. And total, straightforward candor is absolutely key. I've sat in his courtroom many times, and those of you who have appeared before him, I am not telling you any news, but it is the instinct that many lawyers have to answer a direct question with explanation, you know, is definitely not the way to go in Judge Moyé's court, and I don't think it's the way to go in any court. I think you can give your explanation, but I think you need to start with a direct answer. Did X happen? No. Now, Your Honor, can I tell you why that's not significant? And Judge Moyé will tell you whether you can or cannot tell him that's not significant. But what you don't want to do is answer that question with a, yeah, this, that, and the other, and then, and all, you know. So, I mean, I think the candor piece, you know, I think has really been reinforced. And you hear the image that a lawyer has in a given jurisdiction just matters so much. What you do in this case is going to impact how you are perceived in other cases. And so your personal brand and your personal credibility are also key. The judges, you know, like people, they talk amongst themselves about lawyers. And so how you behave with lawyer X will be known to lawyer Y. So.
We've talked before about what it was like to make a decision for your family at a time it may have been detrimental to your career. So, for example, moving back to Dallas when you were succeeding and excelling in New York. Now, spoiler alert, you've done the same here. But can you give other women lawyers any advice on how you made those decisions and how you did so as such a successful trial lawyer with so many accomplishments?
Yeah. I think probably two key things to keep in mind is one, kind of just the grit and the determination, but the other is to not get yourself wrapped up in a particular timeline and a particular schedule. You know, what I always tell young women at my firm now is this whole partner track, this schedule that was put in place with no consideration of you, your life, and how you're living. It's for a whole different time. So you can't just transplant that onto your life and make yourself fit into that schedule, or you're a failure. Sometimes you have to give yourself more time. Sometimes you have to take time for your family. I went, after my third child was born, I did part-time for a while because she had some special therapeutic needs. And so sometimes you've got to take time to take care of your family, and that means you don't get to place X at the same time as perhaps a guy who has a full-time person to take care of everything that goes on in their family. But that doesn't mean you're a failure, you know? So I think you just have to give yourself the time and stay determined even if you can't stay on that schedule. Just be flexible and make sure you're doing your best, but understand that sometimes you have to step back. Sometimes you absolutely do. The other thing, though, is the reality is there will be hard times. I mean, each of my children has a significant work story associated with them. With my oldest, we had to change a trial date for 6 months because of her due date. And so I had to go back to trial when she was 6 months old. 6-week trial, very demanding. With the middle one, I had to do an argument at the Fifth Circuit when she was 4 weeks old, and could barely stand. Having been up all night, but I did it anyway. And with the last one, I had actually stepped away for a while and was GC for a healthcare company. And we were in the midst of major Senate investigations when she was born. So through all those things, there's no stepping away in the midst of those kind of crises. So you have to just have the physical stamina and determination to, sometimes it's gonna be super hard and I'm just gonna have to, push through those super hard periods.
Did you feel the need or the implication that you would have to kind of depart from your natural tendency to be uber prepared in those times where you had to focus on your family, or how did you balance that?
I think that that's what part-time was for me. It was my attempt to do that, to try to take less. I will tell you that part-time, you can't change fundamentally who you are, right? At least I can't, I can't not be uber prepared. And so my solution during that period was to try to take fewer cases so that I could be uber prepared for the ones that I did take. But the reality for me is that there really have been a lot of just daunting physical demands, periods where you cannot sleep, as much as you would like, because I can't not do it that way. Once you've done it, it's hard to alter your process. And I always want to feel like the outcome wasn't because I didn't do my best. The outcome was as a result of me doing my best. And that's win or lose, because obviously we all lose cases as well.
So as a living legend, or what we're deeming the lively legend, you've also learned from living legends. So can you tell us about any of the mentors that you've had, and what is one piece of advice that you've incorporated into your practice?
Yeah. Sure. So probably the first one I would mention is Tom Barr, who was the partner at Griffith that I used to go in early to try to have the opportunity to speak to. Just such a hardworking person, but a man of so much integrity and character. And one of the things that he always said to me, and that stays with me to this day, we only win cases by being smarter and working harder. Neither of those is enough by itself. He was just a tremendous influence. When I left Griffith, I had the opportunity to work with Ted Wells, who is now co-chair of litigation at Paul Weiss. And Ted, just again, incredibly talented trial lawyer, but really reinforced how important it is to be authentic you, like real you at all times in the courtroom. And I'm sure you probably experienced some of this. As a woman, you feel sometimes a need to try to make your voice deeper, or to try to dress in a way where you think you're fitting in more. And, you know, his message was the jury, the court wants to know real you. Like, it's hard to believe somebody when they're not showing you who they really are. And so he helped me to get the confidence to just be me. Going to trial with him was the first time I wore a red suit into a courtroom, you know, that kind of thing. And just learned so much from his craft and his technique. And then the final one I would mention is here in Dallas, when I was at Vincent and Elkins, Bill Sims, who is just a delight, just an incredible person to work with. And what was important for Bill is that this be fun. Like, this case needs to be fun for us also. Not just hardworking and grueling, but make sure your team is having fun and enjoy being with each other. And I do think those ingredients are critical when you're asking people to do nothing but spend time with you. It should be pleasant as well. And so from him, I think I learned that key factor.
So you have to have the opportunities to be authentic, right? Wearing a red suit in some jurisdictions is more difficult than, you know, you need to wear a blue or a black suit. But I think that that's an incredible credit to your mentors and the people that you've worked for, that they've allowed you to break those barriers as well. It takes two, basically, to do those types of things. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I certainly would tell anybody, I mean, you have to temper your physical appearance to your venue. Absolutely, you do. I think women now have much more latitude than we had in the past, but I still think that, you know, what you wear in Connecticut is different from, you know, what you wear in a courtroom in San Francisco. Because for a jury, I think you really do have to be careful about that. Yep.
And some things just happen organically, right? So your trial team at Apple, you didn't think that your trial team needed to look a certain way or act a certain way, and things just happened that way for the best.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and that was a court trial also. Our judge was actually from Texas, had a UT graduate, Judge Gonzalez-Rogers. Yeah, so it was really nice to have her as well.
She looked out.
Yep.
So do you have any principles of your practice that you hold in high regard, whether it's dealing with opposing counsel or developing case strategy or counseling clients?
Sure. So, you know, I would say, especially in dealing with opposing counsel, I think a lot of wasted energy goes into just kind of bombastic exchanges that really have nothing to do with the outcome of the lawsuit. So my motto is always try nice first. I will try a nice, respectful approach. There are some people, Gracen, that will not work with, that all they can respect is intense aggression. And so I'll do that if I have to, but that's not what I lead with. And if, you know, you require that, and I'll explain to you, this is what you require of me, and I will actually give it to you. But I do believe that trying to have professional interactions with opposing counsel is the thing to do. It's not our case, it's our clients' cases. And we will see each other in other venues, and we're supposed to be professional. So I try to avoid all the kind of wasted, bombastic, you know, kind of behavior that you sometimes see, unfortunately. In terms of, you know, an approach to a case, I do always start broad, you know, so I'll look at the case. And I remember for the Apple thing in particular, when we were talking about who's going to handle these kinds of issues, this is before the Epic thing, what would be like the core principles that you wanted to convey to the fact finder, to the jury, to the judge, and start broad and then come back into developing the evidence. I think particularly for the kind of cases I do, which tend to be large and complex, you can get lost in discovery. You're just discovering everything, right? And you don't really want to do all of that. You really want to be focused to make sure that you're getting those core principles, and other things will come up as you move along. But I think starting with what is my end game is really the best approach for me.
What is something that you would tell younger you, either before you were going to law school or as you just graduated? What would be one lesson that you would tell?
I think to be patient and to understand that it's not all about you. So coming out of law school, my view was the person who's going to be the partner is going to be the person that works hard and gets, the A+. I had a very grade mentality. And I think what you have to realize is that this is like a twist and turn, up and down profession, that opportunities will come at different times. None of us can manufacture lawsuits to make sure that you're going to get, the right experience at the right time. And so I would tell myself to just be a little more patient and to spend more time, probably early on, being broad as opposed to being narrow. Because when I started out, I was very focused on developing the craft and not as focused on developing relationships. I think the two need to be in parallel throughout your career. And I didn't know that starting out, so I try to tell people that all the time.
I think there's an interesting tension too between being the most prepared in the room, which I suspect that you usually are, but also being the most authentic.
Right.
You're not scripted,
Right.
and you're a little bit helter-skelter in that moment of, things
Right.
don't always go the way that you want them to. How do you think?
Yeah, no, I absolutely think there is. And when I say being the most prepared, I mean so prepared that whichever way it goes, you're going to be able to handle it because you've thought through the issues, but not so prepared that you're not responding to the other person. You're just giving your speech, right? The only way to really persuade is to actually listen to the questions and answer the questions as opposed to thinking about this point I want to make, right? So you can try to put those points in, but you have to be prepared enough to be fluid so that you're not scripted. And that's what I was saying when working with witnesses. I never wanted to look like we've talked about this a gazillion times and now I'm going to say this and you parrot this answer. I just really want them to understand the points we're going to try to make. And as I tell them, it's my job to get those points out of you. So just let me spend enough time with you to understand how to do that.
And you just sit back and relax and I'll ask you my question.
Exactly. Now I'm doing my job. So just listen to me and we'll be fine. Right.
So you're a living legend and a trial lawyer and an advocate and a mother and a partner. What do you feel your legacy is and what do you want it to be?
What I would hope is that I can leave our profession fundamentally better and different from the way it was when I entered it. I think, I alluded to this earlier. I mean, I think the opportunities for women are tremendously more than they ever have been. I think there are more opportunities for people of color, but I still feel like we have a long ways to go. So what matters to me the most at this point in my career is leaving behind people that I have helped nurture and train so that they can go on to do so much greater things than I was ever able to do. And I tell many of the women and young men in my office that it's now time for me to push you and to step into the background. So I'd like to leave a legacy of wonderful women and people of color excelling at the top of the profession.
Well, I am so happy that you were able to share your story with me today, and I'm hoping that everyone got to know a little bit more about you as well. I'm thankful as a young lawyer that the Dallas legal community has you and that we're so lucky that you rejoined us. So thank you so much for your time today, Veronica.
Thank you, Gracen. It's been a delight.